Our agenda tonight is to look at the site, look at three options we have been developing that are conceptual in nature, but explore potentials for the future library and its configuration on the site. And then to have you all engage in discussion about what you have seen, what you prefer, and give us some preliminary guidance on how we're going to move forward to advance the design to a final preferred concept. Here we see the basic configuration of the existing library on the existing site in its context with the park and the community. As we consider how to configure the new library on this site, we need to think about not only the library building footprint, but also the surrounding landscape, as well as the parking that will accompany the project. We also have to consider site access, such as where you'll be able to drive onto the site and park for library use, as well as for use of the park. Zooming in on the piece of the property that we have available to us for the library building, we see the existing building here, but we also see in the red line the setback line, which helps establish what the actual buildable area is on the property. Zooming in on the piece of the property that we have available to us for the library building, we see the existing building here, but we also see in the red line the setback line, which helps establish what the actual buildable area is on the property. We also see a stand of mature trees that could be negatively impacted by the library building footprint. Not apparent when you walk the site and go around the library is this purple line, which shows where a 36-inch diameter storm drain cuts through the site, taking water from the southern area beyond the library and then across the park and ultimately out into the drainage system. Although it is not impossible to reroute the line, that does increase project costs. Also, it may impact the trees if it is rerouted through the grove. The area highlighted here is the slope of the site, the knoll that exists in the area where future parking will be coming into the project. Another interesting aspect of the topography of the site, of course, is the knoll, the hill that exists in the park, which is an attractive vista for the library and a useful sledding hill in the wintertime. The orange line here represents a line at about 70 feet above sea level, and that's the line at which the new library's floor elevation will be. It corresponds approximately to where the existing street elevation is. The site slopes downhill to the north for the top of the slide from this line into the park. So this illustrates a section cut through the existing library, which shows where the floor levels are relative to the street and to the park. You can see the little bridge that connects from street level to the main floor level and the access from the back of the building out to the park. Zooming in on the piece of the property that we have available to us for the library building, we see the existing building here, but we also see in the red line the setback line, which helps establish what the actual buildable area is on the property. So we're going to clear away the existing building, but leave here the representation of the parking that we anticipate coming and the site constraints, the setback and the underground water line. So let's start looking at some options. This option shows some things that will be common to all of the schemes we're looking at. One is the dark space shown here at the center. This is conceived of as a place of community gathering within the library, a kind of a hub of activity or a kind of a village center that exists within the space of the library. Another aspect we see here is the organization of the building components. They're basic blocks of building, which is a reference to the heritage that Weymouth has from the ironworks age up through the shoe manufacturing age, of very basic, significant architectural elements that were simply configured. However, they were not simply arranged, basically because the organization of streets in Weymouth is far from orthogonal. It's a network of roads that developed off of a network of paths, and they don't have a rigid organization to them. And perhaps the library building form can reflect that and therefore be further connected to the essence of what it is to be a library in Weymouth. A third component that is common to all the schemes is the back terrace. As you come out of the library to the north, to the park side, there'll be some space out there for use by the library that is open air, it's in the out of doors, but it is connected to the library operations and organization, spatially as well as programmatically. Again, clearing away that previous scheme and the existing building, we're going to set this option up to have less impact on the site, occupy less of the landscape. So a more consolidated footprint is represented in this option 2. It still runs into the tree area a little bit, but saves a significant amount of the trees. It does go over the drain line, but with a relatively modest rerouting, we can bring the drain line back on target as it exits the site. We still see the same concepts of making a space in the middle that is a kind of a village center, and surrounding it with basic building elements that make up the rest of the library and frame that space. This option 3 is the most consolidated footprint. It strives to avoid the drain line and preserve as many of the significant trees on site as possible. So if we zoom in, we can look at how the interior of the library is laid out and organized, at least at a conceptual level. Going back to look at option 1, it takes up the most of the site of any of the schemes, and that results in sort of clearing away about this much space. This allows the form of the library to sort of open up dramatically out to the park side and more or less make a kind of embracing gesture towards the park. So what we can see in this layout is the 3 orange triangles which represent entry points to the library, one from the street side, one from the park side, and also an after hours entry point that comes into what we see on the right hand side is the meeting room cluster of program activities. On the left hand side we have the children's area out towards the park along that long bar, and then some administrative spaces closest to the street where deliveries will happen off of Franklin Street. The gray areas represent more back of house spaces for toilet rooms, mechanical rooms, and things of that nature. The purple areas, we see the friends of the library area and the cafe represented that way. In the center is that gathering place, the village center area, where there is space for historical displays and new book displays. Then on the upper level, we see adult services in green, the teen space in orange, and the new book area in the dark orange, together with the local history space. Part of the concept here is to arrive on the second floor and be able to see through and over new books to really get a glimpse of the local history sort of showcased at that end of the library. Adult services has light green areas, which are the collection areas predominantly. The darker green areas are the seating areas. And that sort of the rectangular bumps out along the side of the adult spaces represent group study rooms, which are bays looking out over the park, taking advantage of the north light and wonderful view that can be had from that area. Teens also has a couple of group study rooms you can see projecting out on that side of the teen space towards the park as well. In that center space, that village center area, that's where we have the stair come up from the lower level. The elevator opens out onto that space, and we have the opportunity for a seating edge over the entrance to the park, which will probably be some of the most desirable seating in the library. Here, this is just some of the preliminary sketches that we did to develop the concept. And you can see, again, some of the basic layout and some of the ideas about where collections go, where seating goes, and where the overall distribution program is on the second level. Here, this is just some of the preliminary sketches that we did to develop the concept. And you can see, again, some of the basic layout and some of the ideas about where collections go, where seating goes, and where the overall distribution program is on the second level. And then looking at the ground floor level, again, we see the sort of the center space, the village center, framed by the collection of buildings that serve to define the space and provide pathways to entering the building in between those blocks of building. Taking that basic diagram and then overlaying it with a preliminary concept of the furnishings in the library gives us some sense of confidence that we have an arrangement of the components that will actually really function. It's still very preliminary, very conceptual, but we are beginning to test it to see that it really can work. Taking that basic diagram and then overlaying it with a preliminary concept of the furnishings in the library gives us some sense of confidence that we have an arrangement of the components that will actually really function. It's still very preliminary, very conceptual, but we are beginning to test it to see that it really can work.